Thank you. I'd like to call to order the May 11th workshop meeting of the New Canaan Board of Education. Before we review and approve the agenda, we have two additions or amendments to the agenda. One is the two discussion topics. One is the district calendar and the revisions that need to be made to that calendar given the extra days. And second is a discussion on a special committee to be formed, a Board of Education special committee to be formed for reopening our schools. Is there a motion for that amendment? Sherry, second. Carl, all in favor? Okay, motion to approve the revised agenda. Jen, second. Brendan, all in favor? Okay, with that, we can begin our discussion of the district calendar. Dr. Letzi?
Sure. And again, I'd like to welcome everyone to our Board of Education workshop and apologize for my inability to have coffee and cookies delivered to your home. The first piece around district calendar revisions, there's been quite a bit of discussion around this, of course, right? We heard last week, middle of last week, from the governor that the schools were going to remain closed for the remainder of the school year. And while we certainly anticipated such an announcement, you don't have it, you don't know the facts until you have it in hand. The result of that, of course, is be engaged in the conversations around activities and award ceremonies and end of year types events and closure and etc. And so I've been talking with the cabinet, talking with the administrative council a bit, and talking with some colleagues and trying to put a plan in place that I'd like to share with you tonight around sort of the calendar for the remainder of the school year. To begin, back on April 3rd, we received a memo from Jessa Myrtle, who's the legal director for the Connecticut State Department of Education. And in that memo, Attorney Myrtle writes that, let's see, essentially that schools are expected to maintain the last day of school that was in place and on the books on the day that we closed for us, which was March 11th. Okay, so on March 11th we closed, and when we did, we said at that point our last day of school was June 18th. What we did going into the close, again, as we began in this, we didn't know the duration, we didn't know the scope, we were just sort of figuring it out and going in that phase one. We called the 12th a snow day, and then we began teaching on the 13th in our distance learning program, right? Now, my first recommendation to the board, again, we're not voting tonight, but just conversation, thinking about all this, is that day on the 12th, that we don't necessarily consider that a snow day and push out to the 19th, but the day we closed on the 11th, we maintain June 18th as our last day of school based on the guidance in the memo from the State Department. Now I have it, I can share it up on the screen if you like. Essentially part of what it says is waiving the 180-day school requirement was not intended to promote school districts rescheduling the end of the school year to an earlier date than the date publicized prior to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, including if there were snow days prior to the pandemic that needed to be added. Connecticut State Department. And essentially what the memo does, just to be clear, is go through 4 different scenarios with ways districts could have used their days, whether during April break or other times. Every scenario concludes with, therefore, the date should be the date that was determined prior to the close. So regardless of whether you've used days in April, regardless of other things, they really are requesting and expecting every district to do that. So on the 11th, our last day of school was the 18th. To begin the discussion, as a starting point, because then we're going to have some other kind of suggestions going from there. But as a starting point, I want to start with the understanding that the 18th remains our last day of school going into the next piece. So with that understanding, and again, everything's open to discussion, but I'll just lay it out and then we can go into the pieces, what have you. With that understanding on the 18th, one of my suggestions is for the board to consider rolling back 2 days the end of the school year. See, as you know, in New Canaan, we do 182 days. We do 2 days more than 180. And we do that for lots of reasons. And I think it's the right thing to do on a typical year, whenever we can. But this is an extraordinary year, an extraordinary time. So one suggestion, one item for discussion is for the board to roll back to, instead of on the 18th, to make the final last day of distance learning on the 16th of June. And then my recommendation from there would be to make the 17th into a day of school-wide sort of closure, that we could put together what you would call almost like a reverse parade, where the teachers would come to school, they could park their cars, stay at their cars, maintain the appropriate social distancing, and kids and parents and others could drive through, wave, honk, say hi, do those kinds of things, just to see each other one last time and try to bring some closure to the school year. I think it'd be a good celebration of everything we've done. It'd be a way for people to just acknowledge and thank, and maybe breathe a sigh of relief, as we get through the end. That would be the 181st day. On the 182nd day, I recommend that we give that to teachers to do whatever they have to do to close out their school year. The distance learning has created a whole new set of managerial, organizational challenges, and to give a day for teachers to be able to go through and organize what they have to organize, write comments, give grades, do whatever they have to do. I think that's a good use of that last 182nd day. Now, just for context, if we had a year where we had a significant number of snow days, the board in the past has rolled it back a couple of days to get to 180th day. But in place of the 181st and 182nd days, they became professional learning days with professional obligations and responsibilities. In this context, given all of what everyone's doing, my suggestion is, or recommendation is, to instead provide the format for that closure on the 181st day, and then give teachers an opportunity to do everything else that they have to do, to end the year well. And to close it out, for them professionally, because again, the managerial challenges are significant in this context. That leaves, we've talked about the 3 days in the April break. And what my recommendation around those 3 days is for us to provide 5 or 6 different options, and allow the teachers to vote to pick one, allow the students and families to vote to pick another one, and then to have that third one where we deem it that most appropriate. I think that it's a good idea because it will help to break up the routine. I think we're all feeling a bit of quarantine fatigue at this point. And I wish we could do this like right away, but the high school is engaged in their AP testing this week and next week. So the days would be after Memorial Day. But to break up the weeks just a little bit, so we'd have some 3 or 4 day weeks as we go into the end, I think will be beneficial to kids and to families. And I actually think it'll be better than even if we could, even putting them at the end of the year, because of the what's next piece, and because it provides students a chance to catch up with anything they may need to catch up with. It allows families an opportunity to slow the pace for that day or what have you. So I'd like to do that, get those options out tomorrow if possible. Again, with the understanding that the days wouldn't happen before Memorial Day, because we need to keep things in session as we go through the APs, and those have been pushed out a little bit later this year because of everything. So they would have been done the end of this week, but they're a week later. So that would be for those 3 spring break days. All of this, if you sort of agree and think we should go forward with it, I could have sort of planned up and written out for our Board of Education meeting a week from tonight. But I certainly wouldn't do that before an opportunity to talk with you about it and get your feedback and see what you think. And thought that a workshop would be a great opportunity to do that. Yeah, Brendan.
I just want to say that I'm supportive of it. It seemed like a very good plan, and I think providing, for some flexibility and days off, I think is a good call, because I definitely agree. People are, families, and I'm sure teachers and all of you are, fatigued at times from doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Right.
So I'm definitely supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. Gianna?
So given some of the emails we've gotten about other districts ending earlier, and some of the emails about parents hoping to have school end a little bit earlier, what would we do if, let's say, we had one group picking the 15th and one group picking the 12th, and then, knowing how we like to strategize in this community, I just, I could see that happening and being maybe a desirous outcome of many in this community. So what would, would that work with all your planning? And then I kind of worry about, sort of your end of year celebration being a little bit late if people choose to have those last 3 days really being, I don't know what the administration do, but I can imagine some teachers and parents might coordinate.
Well, I think it depends. We've got to look, and you're right, being strategic around what the options are that we provide. I know that they're looking at a 4th grade ceremony, sort of celebration for those kids. They're working on kind of the details around that. So we would stay away from that day because they've got some things being planned around that and some other options. So we have to look and see what kind of some of the special events and things that are being planned. The sophomore simulation is occurring the first week in June. I want to work around that. So there are some things that are happening that we'll try to work around, and then be thoughtful around sort of what the options are. We couldn't. I think we need a last day of school, right? We want to make sure that we can close out on that 16th. The day before the last day, could you do something? Maybe. I mean, the 15th could be an option if that's something that people think they'd like to do. I mean, we'll have to look and see. Kind of be strategic around the options we bring forward, but we have to do it again in the context of the special events and celebrations that are being scheduled. Graduation is going to be in there somewhere. We still don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but one of the days we're going to have that. So it's one of the reasons I think just tacking them on at the end could get us in some trouble, because these other things are being scheduled and we have to have days to put them in and time to plan them and to get all the approvals and everything we need.
Thanks.
Sure. Carl.
So Deanna just alluded to some of the emails that we've received where schools are neighboring districts are closing June 10th or June 12th. Is that accurate? And if so, are those towns abiding by the letter and spirit of the memo that you read, and then tacking their extra days on at the end, or what are they doing? Can you just let us the facts of kind of those situations?
Sure. To your first question, yes, that is true. There's some other towns have shortened their school year. That is not in the 180-day waiver guidance, and the memo that we received from the State Department. They very explicitly shared that they were asking us not to do that. Each district, they manage the calendar and do things the way that best suits them. But as I read, and actually in the last conference call with the commissioner, I specifically asked the question if they anticipated that this guidance would change around that last day of school, and he very directly responded, no. They believe in the distance learning program. They believe in the work that's going on in districts. They understand and value education and the opportunities, and don't anticipate any change in the guidance to keep that last day of school as it was on the day you closed. So those, I don't want to comment on what is driving the other districts or what decision they made, but for us and following this, and I think given the system that we have in place and the other options that we are shortening our school year by the 2 days, and you could even argue 3 days, because we did call that as a snow day when we went out and things. So to go to back from the 18th to the 16th, I think makes good sense. And that's what the board has the ability to do that. And we've done that in years past. But beyond that, I think that we've got a really good, strong program going that's providing a solid education for our kids. And I don't know why we would look to make that shorter on the end when we have other options that I think will meet the need to help people to recharge and energize a little bit.
So I'm concerned that, in particular, since the 3 days will be used after Memorial Day, so it'll basically be, kind of 2, maybe 3 weeks between the end of Memorial Day and the 16th. And then there'll be 3 days that'll be off. We'll end up getting in kind of a gray area, a nebulous area where kind of the whole thing starts to fall apart because people start to want to just take off. They're just done. That would be both students and parents and teachers and everybody. That would be my concern on that type of approach, where it's just hard to maintain order in those last few weeks as you're kind of going to school and kind of taking some days off, all in a very short period of time. That's also after Memorial Day, and people start smelling the barn. So anyway, I'd voice that as a concern.
Okay, thanks. Julie.
Yeah, just going along what Carl said. I mean, I love the idea of the 3 days. I love the idea that people have a voice in it, but my same concern is also that very tight time frame. Basically 2 weeks and 4 days with all those special events that are planned, as you said, the 4th grade, moving up, senior awards, whatever it is, like certain days that we just can't touch anyway. So I would just want to make sure that, while it's wonderful that we would give, I think, families and teachers an option to choose the date, I wonder if that could end up tripping us up in the end if we don't, set aside certain days that are not touchable, and then we're not given a whole lot of choice in the end anyway. So that's kind of my concern.
Sure. Well, and just to add, we do have to set some days aside that aren't touchable. Like I mentioned, the sophomore simulation and things like that, unless you were to do an elementary day that's different than a high school day, things like that, which could be possible. But
yeah, I do worry though, just again about the parents. I know that certainly we've seen emails from folks that are just, I think the high school parents, it's less of a worry because they're not as having to be as on with their kids, but for especially working parents with elementary kids, I think it's a real challenge. So we just have to be careful. I know we're trying to help, we're trying to make this a gift, and I just want to make sure that it comes across as a gift and not something that's even more of a hassle for folks.
Sure. Thanks. Jen or Bob or
go ahead, Jen.
I hear everyone's concerns. I think that once we get after Memorial Day, I think it's always hard for kids, regardless of the situation that we're in now. I mean, I know my kids after Memorial Day are so done anyway. However, I do feel like the structure is so good for them right now. I mean, it's so hard for all of us, and structure is pretty much the one thing that helps us all get through these days. And having a couple days where they feel like they're getting a break and getting a little bit of a vacation will be nice. And I do think we should take off those extra 2 days for sure. But I do think, I mean, I know some people may have places like other homes, but we're all kind of in lockdown mode at this point anyway. And I kind of feel like we should stay the course. And I think this is, again, good for our kids to have the structure. And I kind of feel like we should go up, listen to the governor, and stick with the plan. And, that's how I feel.
thank you.
And wait, can I ask one quick question? When you do this, the teachers and the students, correct? Are you going to, you have 3 days to choose from, or are you, how exactly is that working?
Yeah, exactly. We'll look, and we've got to work around other events and things and give a set number of days, 3 or 4 days that can be chosen from.
And then the only other thing I would say is, again, with all the unknowns right now, I think people just want to know. They just want to know. So as soon as we can get this set and move forward, I mean, the same thing for the graduation. I know we're all working and trying to figure things out, but it's all the unknown stuff that is making, so hopefully on Monday we can have a plan and be able to tell that we can all move forward.
Great. Bob?
Yeah, I just, I know everybody's been doing a lot of good work. It's been a really tough time for, I think, everybody adjusting, whether it's in school, at home. Um, I think, I think the idea of that the education department's trying to say is don't shorten it less than 180, right? I mean, that's like that's where we don't want to go past, right? So, I mean, I think from what I understand it, I think we have some flexibility then maybe towards the end. And, I was looking at the calendar. I would love to see the last day be, the 12th, which is that Friday, and call it a little early. I think everybody wants out. I think I've gotten quite a few phone calls about this, and I'm sure everybody here has gotten somebody that has an opinion about it either way. But I think that, a good thing would be to end a little early. If we plan for that Friday, it's sort of a nice way to wrap it up, and you get a few days back early. That's what I think I'd like to see. And you'd still be under 180 days. You'd still be over 180 days, which is in the spirit of keeping the school year intact. Is that true or no? If we ended the 15th, it'd be 181 days, I think, right? So we'd be one day over. Because we have the three from the Easter holiday plus kind of 2 extra because we go 182. So if we took 4, that would get us to the Friday. That would get us to 181 days, right?
Well, we lost that one day in between the closure and when distance learning started. So you're down a day there.
I see.
Yep. In the memo from the legal department, regardless of whether or not you use days during the spring break, they have a scenario each way. And in either scenario, irregardless of whether you came into school during spring break or not, your last day was still the last day that was published on the day you went out. So within their guidance, so they're, essentially saying, asking to keep that. But I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
But it's a recommendation, right? I mean, all the other towns around us are doing it too. So, I mean, I think we have control within the 180-day window sort of to manage our own calendar, right? Or no?
To some degree.
Right.
I mean, we have the waiver of the 180 days this year, given the closer. If you remember, we put in for the waiver and we're given the waiver of the 180 days. So you have that on a typical general year. Yeah, you do. You have that flexibility. This has been, it's been a little different, of course, right? And the school days are different. The hours are different. The half days with our PL on Wednesdays and Thursdays, and the change in the schedule in the high school. You're definitely not hitting the 900 hours in the classroom, things like that. So it's all, it's all so fluid. I think, which is why they really kind of tried to draw a line in the sand and just say, look, stick with the date you had when you went out, and all the other variables will just sort themselves out. That's all.
Right, but we're already given a little bit because we're coming off the 18th as it is. So
right.
So that's what I'm saying. If we're going to come off the 18th, let's come off just one extra day and end on the Friday, and that would be my opinion.
Okay. Brendan?
Yeah, I just witnessing 3 kids in my own house going through distance learning. I think what is best for kids is to keep them active. Ideally for as long as possible. We're not going to go through all summer, but I think keeping them active, but giving them some breaks along the way makes a lot of sense to me. I think it's actually what's best for them. I think if we just kind of continue to push and do every single day from here on out, to me, it's just a lot. And so, I just think it's going to be best for all the kids to have a little bit of a break here and there. And we actually only have 4 full weeks. We have, I think 4 full weeks before the end of the year on that calendar. So the only other week beyond Memorial Day week that we could have a day off is next week. I guess theoretically it could be this week too, but realistically it's next week. So I just think it's the best option to both, keep our kids in kind of learning mode, at the same time, giving our families, kids, teachers, etc., a little bit of a break.
Okay. Gianna?
You know, I'm going to let Sherry go first because she hasn't spoken yet, and then I'll speak after Sherry.
Oh,
Okay.
that was so polite, Deanna. I was just going to say, obviously, you know, our board is illustrative that there's different stakeholders who have different desires for the calendar. But one of my concerns is the dual working parent contingent. And I think while I think it sounds fun and engaging to go out and survey people on the days they want off, I think that could ultimately be frustrating for some people. And I think the most important thing for a household with 2 working parents is consistency. So I think that if we're going to go this approach with taking the 3 days off between now and the last day, one, I think we need to decide those days immediately. And I think the administration should decide those days. And I think we should communicate those out. I just feel like taking the time to survey and having kind of 3 ad hoc days, I think it could be frustrating for people. It's not, I just, people are juggling a lot right now. I mean, between work and
Sure.
homeschooling, and I think this could end up being a little detail that frustrates some people. So just, like, I know you're being so creative and you're trying so hard to get this worked out. So I applaud you. I appreciate that. But that's just my 2 cents.
Actually, it was nice to think there was one decision somewhere that we wouldn't have to make, but it's understood. I mean, we definitely don't want to do something that'll be more frustrating for people. Yeah. So if that's the general consensus, you know, and you're right, it is a tight window, and we do know the constraints on certain days. So we certainly, if the board felt that way, that is certainly another option as well.
Yeah, this is Carl chime in again here. I think there's something really to be said about simplicity at this point. You know, we've all been dealing with so much complexity and so much uncertainty, and to have something that's clean and simple would be great. And my fear too is that if you do lose people and you disengage, you know, you will lose that closure. You know, you'll go out with a whimper, not with a bang. And in particular with regard to, I think the idea of recognizing the teachers at the school is a great one. My concern is that if in this scenario where you come back from Memorial Day, you have 3 days off here and there, you know, you may have people fall by the wayside, and then the teachers, and then the next day, you know, you will lose a lot of the population to really make an impact on that day to salute the teachers, which I think is a great idea and we should absolutely do. But to me, you know, something like what Bob suggested of just the end is the 12th or whatever that Friday is, and then we're taking our 3 days off, and then we're getting to our 180 days. That's it. End of school year. But you know, please come out and support the teachers and show the love. I think that would be a nice, clean, simple, and impactful way to do it. That's my
opinion. Okay. Thanks.
So I think, Sherry, you had a good suggestion about just deciding, but I also do agree with Carl and Julie and Bob. I think picking random days between now and the end of the year could be more stressful, particularly on our teachers who have children of their own. And so they may be off, but their kids are not off. So they're still teaching and they're still managing their own families at home. So it's not really a day off for them. So it isn't as restful and relaxing as maybe you might think it is. The other thing is that the end of the year, I think of as often being celebratory days and things that are much more relaxed after, you know, except for maybe at the high school where they're having exams, but then the whole last week is exams. So they're really not in a normal schedule at that point. So I just feel like particularly at the elementary level and a little bit at the middle school level, those last weeks are very relaxed, and quite frankly, from a disease standpoint, the weather hopefully will be getting nicer, and we want our kids outside, not inside on their computers all day long doing distance learning. So I think, and the only emails I've gotten are from parents saying they want the school year shortened. So our parents want it shortened. Our communities surrounding us want it shortened. I think we should be consistent. And as long as we're staying within the guidelines of, you know, doing the 180 days, We should manage that celebration, because I agree. I think that final celebration is an amazing opportunity for the kids to have a closure for the year. I think we need to find a closure. But I think this is stressful on everyone, and I think we need to sort of give everyone time in the summer and, quite frankly, to plan for next year. So those are my thoughts.
The only thing I would just add to that, Deanna, for what it's worth, is I don't believe I don't believe using the days at the end is following the guidelines from the state. Again, I'll share the memo around. I'm glad to share it, but the memo from the state does say very, very explicitly that the end date for the district should be the date that was publicized prior to the impact.
So did all the other districts have those publicized?
The other districts are making decisions, their own. As the Board of Education sets the calendar and what have you, but I just don't want to do that and say it is in compliance with what the memo says, because as I read the memo and interpret it, it's not. That's all.
Yeah, I think we need to see the memo. I think that would be helpful.
I can share with you on the screen right now. Let's see.
Could you email it to us? Because it's actually hard to
read.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, that
would be came out April 3rd. Yep.
That'd be great.
And this is the thing. This was the paragraph right here that I just shared, where it says, waiving the 180-day school requirement was not intended to promote school districts rescheduling the end of the school year to an earlier date than that publicized. Okay. But yeah, I'll send it around. Glad to. And it's all on their website and everything else. Mm-hmm.
Great.
Katrina?
So just hearing all of the different perspectives and ideas, I certainly appreciate all those, the different thoughts on this. I'm wondering if kind of meeting in the middle is just choosing, once we hit Memorial Day, just choosing Fridays off for the rest of the year or Wednesdays off. And maybe that's the decision that the teachers and families can help us make, is that, we're kind of phasing out the year little by little by just, making a decision on changing the schedule for the last month of school. By dropping the last 3 Fridays or last 3 Wednesdays, or adding a day to, whatever we need to do. I don't know how that aligns with the celebrations that we already have scheduled or that we know are coming, and still gives us the flexibility. I think, it is interesting, the last 3 to 4 days, having to think about celebrations for graduation and the 8th grade, promotion. There's a lot to get done. And it's not easy to schedule, and we don't have all the information we need yet to make all those plans. So those are my thoughts, and I would love to hear what other people think about that as well.
Yeah, just to add into the mix, if I could, the graduation date is Monday, June 15th, and that was established by the board back in the fall. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Yeah, so again, just for what it's worth. Okay, Brandon?
Yeah, just one comment. I totally appreciate the thoughts around, moving up the end of the year, the last day of school. But I actually think, just doing this every day, with kids, it's I feel like it's more stressful to think about the push, every single day of the week other than Memorial Day, between now and the end of the year, versus having a day off here or there. And even if we have to go into that week of the 16th of June, I still think that's reasonable. That's okay, so long as we have a little bit of a breakup in the sort of monotony of doing the same thing every day. And so when I think about, stress reduction and what's best for kids from an educational standpoint, I do think actually doing that extra week of school is helpful. I totally appreciate that all of this is not optimal, particularly for parents who are working a full day. 2 parents working a full day. Some parents I'm sure have to be out of the house as well. But I do think that's, just weighing all the options. I do think that's best. In fact, I think, if I were to think about the entire summer, I think it's great that the kids are in school for an extra half a week or 2 days that final week. Or I guess it's 1 day plus a day, potentially seeing their teachers. I think that's a big benefit of this that, we wouldn't have if we were to move the school year end up.
So why don't, unless there's others, comments or anyone who hasn't spoken, why don't we do it this way? Why don't we, I'll write up a couple of different options. What I've heard, and I think the board generally is in agreement around this, that adding a decision to other people's plate might not be the right call. So why don't we put a couple of options together to share, and I'll include, sort of the guidance that we've been following as well, so you have that context. And we can share it with the board on Monday night for a selection and a decision. Again, all of us we're just all trying to do the best thing, as we think about all of it. And I know that your feedback is the same. So there's no winners or losers in any of this, as we're saying. There's not. It's not optimal. Optimal is having our kids in school. So just trying to do the best we can for the most people, most and the kids and all. So there's a lot to reflect on between now and then. So if you'll do that, we'll get a couple of options written up, and we can kind of sink our teeth into it Monday night and pick one. And whatever direction the board feels best in going, we're certainly going to support that. Make it happen. All right.
Good. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Thanks.
All right, next up is a discussion on the formation of a new special committee for the Board of Education around reopening our schools and looking ahead to summer and fall and all of the specifics around planning and working together as a town to prepare to open our schools. Do you want to add some comments on that, Dr. Lutzy?
I'll always say yes when asked that question. So what we're thinking about is a Board of Education special committee that would be, for that purpose, that would really be interfacing with town bodies and others sort of, across the town on that high level. Of course, we'll have operational committees that are functioning in the district around each of our program areas and in each building and other things like that. And I would see a situation where those committees would be reporting out to the Board of Education and to this larger committee. I do like the idea of this being a Board of Ed committee, because it does then, as that committee, you can invite the others to come to be a part of it. But it's also, we all have so much going on in our lives and all, that it will help to provide us with a platform for that committee to be reporting back to the full board regularly, probably at each meeting as we do this. We're learning so much about what it's going to take to prepare and to reopen. There's many different models out there. I'm going almost to a webinar a day now from people from all over the world in independent schools in Europe and in the Far East and other places to learn from their experiences, what they're doing. So, we'll be able to sort of pool that information. But it is important to get the leaders of the town, like the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, Town Council, others together, if not in a room, at least on a screen, to be able to talk these things through, because it's pretty universally understood that there's going to be resource needs with this. Pretty universally understood that towns and boards of ed are going to need to work together to solve some of these problems that we're looking at. So I do think it's important for the Board of Ed to first, of course, take a leadership role in it, but also to have that structure in place for the communication and the resource conversations and those others at a high level.
Great, and the goal would be to develop a charter as we would with any Board of Education committee and bring that forward to you on Monday, but open to obviously any discussion or comments.
Can I just ask, to what extent do we think about this as a way to sort of shape the state's policy? Because a lot of what we may be able to do just may be limited by either guidance or executive order or things like that at the state level. So how are we thinking about that? I mean, if it were me, I think I'd want us to be as as kind of forward leaning and as leading as possible for the state. But interested in anyone's thoughts on that piece.
I'll gladly, jump in to begin. We have been very forward leaning in this from the start. We closed before the state did the closure. We moved our date, the first round prior to the state moving the date. Just by virtue of the folks in town. I mean, we're so fortunate to have an incredible health department and the EOC and all the work that's going on there. So I do believe we'll be able to get the right people at the table to help to guide the work and the planning that's forward at that level. At the board and council and town level. I know internally, we are this work is well underway in looking at and considering different options even before the guidance, because we know what's happening in other countries. We know what's happening in Europe. We know what's happening in China. We know what's going on in Japan. So we're learning from those places and anticipating what some of the requirements may be. We're also kind of scenario planning. Again, we're looking at, if this is the guideline, then that's the solution, and trying to sort of stress test each of those to see what it might look like. There's really creative models out there that some countries have done that we need to take a look at too. We've talked about the Denmark model before. We've talked about some other things. So I think that, I know that the conversation with the commissioner's office and the governor, it continues regularly. Where I'm emailing back and forth with folks in the State Department a couple times a week at least, and they're having the weekly or even twice a week. They're having different conference calls with superintendents and things that I'm on and we're participating in. So I think we're well positioned, and I know that we have to be, because unlike many places up in the north corner, northwest corner, northeast corner, they're not having the same experience that we're having in Fairfield County. And so we have to be really very aware and very plugged into all of it, because it's impacting our communities much more.
Yeah, I would agree. And I just would echo, the point about it's amazing the skill sets and some of the leadership that's come through in our town, just in different areas. And I think we are well positioned, and we have some great skill sets, either newly developed or existing, that, have evolved through this process over the last couple of months. And I think our ability to work together with those individuals and to, think about this together and how we can move things forward at the state level or local level more quickly is an advantage that we do have.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea. I mean, it seems to me we would either want to do this as a committee of the board, but that's because it's so important. It's the most important thing, the work that we're doing this summer. And that to me seems pretty unwieldy with our meeting schedule. And so I would be fully supportive of a committee that would look at this and sort of assist you and give you some feedback and make it, if you're thinking that it's going to give you feedback and make you be able to be more nimble to the changing circumstances, then I think it's one of the things we should do.
Thank you. I do think it would be a big help for us, right, as a district, so we can look more internally, and we know that the board is looking externally in the context in the town. That would be a big help for us. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So I agree. I think it's an important committee to start. The timing of this discussion is interesting, given today's conference Zoom with the state's committee, the Reopen Committee, which doesn't have any parents on it, by the way. It's so interesting. It's like there's only administrative teachers, superintendents, university principals, whatever. So I think it would be critical for us to have a committee that can also liaison with them, because I think they're thinking about good things, but they're already starting to make comments about how they see reopening happening in the fall, and if we want to have some kind of say in how we see that happening for us, I think it's important for us to have a seat at the table with that. They're also talking about funding. I mean, every district is going to have significant pressures around reopening in the fall with all the distance things that may be necessary. And so I think I think the sooner it started and the sooner actually it's both a town and a state focused committee, the better.
Yeah. Well, and I would on that, because I watched that same meeting. I think several of us did. We do have two excellent representatives there. Actually, 3 plus. But Fran Rabinowitz from CAPS is a wonderful champion for superintendents and districts, and the line is open between us and Fran all the time. And of course, the board has Bob Rader, who's the executive director of CABE, and the Commissioner Cardona has had an open line since the start, and I can we're back and forth all the time too. So we do have some the representation for the Board of Ed and for the districts, I think, on that committee will be beneficial. The relationships we have with them as this goes forward too.
Does the state of Connecticut not have a state PTC organization? Is it all only town? Because some states have statewide parent organizations that represent all public schools, and I've never heard of that in this state, but I think in this I think it's a huge oversight by this in this time not to have some sort of parent voice in this, because it's a huge change for everyone.
Yeah, I think there is something. It's a good point. I'll let them know. I think it's a good catch, to see if there's something they can do. And that committee is probably going to function at a high level, as because just the makeup of the committee, they're not necessarily the operational folks.
Right.
But
Yeah, I think that committee is a great idea. I think the more that we can involve the board and that kind of stuff going forward for this, what's going to happen, and be that liaison back to the community, I think it's a great idea. And I think that, this board can hopefully help, the administration out as well. And I think I think whenever we can do that together, that's great.
So we will, there's a draft of a charter, I believe. We'll take a look at that and bring it before the board on Monday. And in the meantime, or at that meeting, after we take a look at the charter, we can start thinking about who the board committee would invite in for conversation to get the ball rolling. Good.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on that? We're all good?
So I guess my only question would be, under our bylaws, I think any committee that we make, it's supposed to be a 2-meeting process.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm wondering is if, given the short period of the summer, if you think that would slow us down, and if there's some other step, we could either have a special meeting at a second time, just a few days later to do, to vote it in. But I wasn't sure you wanted to wait the 2 weeks.
Yeah, that my recommendation would be to have a special meeting for that purpose, so we can get up and going. Because every day feels like a week these days, and yet it goes so quickly. So it's time is too valuable. We couldn't wait just for what's on the calendar.
Well,
so I agree.
Yeah,
I would recommend that. Yeah.
So we don't want to just maybe we can vote as a board to ignore that particular rule given this circumstance, or what. We should just look at the rule and figure out what we think is the best way.
It would be exactly. It would either suspend the bylaw or just have a special meeting. A couple days later, whatever. We could take a look at it. Either way. Okay. Yeah, Carl.
We had the question of needing to revisit the final budget in light of the changes that were required by the final town council vote. So will that, and obviously now kind of the needs are changing in terms of spending priorities and parameters. There's new things. So how will we meld those two requirements from a pure budgetary perspective?
So on the budget side, generally it's the June meeting that we would bring forward sort of the recommendations for, how do we hit the number that we have. And I think we're still going to work with that timeline. The challenge with this is the unknowns. So I think what the approach that we are looking at is really to bring forward the budget with what we know and trying to account for that. And then if there are whatever the additional costs are because of COVID and the guidelines recommendations, that would be, we'll categorize that separately and differently, and keep an eye on it. But we can't really create a contingency just in case, because to do so would be to eliminate, reduce, eliminate, or whatever other programs that we're counting on. So I think we have to make those decisions when we know what the variables are. So we have the flexibility to do that in our budget management, as we go through. Fortunately, the Board of Ed can do that. So I think I know we're planning to bring something forward for the board. So understanding kind of where we are based on what the budget is, and then we'll have to talk about it, I'm sure, at every meeting, if not more often going forward, as we learn more and more about what the demands are going to be.
Okay, that's helpful. Even just understanding that,
Yeah.
Timetable for June, that's helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Okay.
Okay.
So
Anything
then
else roundtable?
our last thing is roundtable, which we sort of already jumped into. So other questions or thoughts or anything? Julie.
Yes. First of all, thank you for the letter that you sent out Friday, I guess it was, about the grading policy. I can't imagine the back and forth on that and the thought process that went into that. So that's really helpful. I actually had a couple people ask me, and you sort of alluded to this in your letter when you said among the different scenarios that you weighed, and you thought about sort of the university or beyond high school. And I know that some universities are allowing kids to choose which courses are pass, fail, or graded. And I just wondered, was that at all, because I've been asked this, was that at all part of the thought process? Or, I would imagine it's very unwieldy, and the whole idea of, calculating GPA is tricky when you've got some classes pass, fail, some classes graded. But could you just sort of explain a little bit about, what your thinking
Sure.
is on that?
Sure, glad to. It was, you can imagine every possible iteration of a grading policy was sort of brought forward and considered and thought about. And that's actually my daughter's experience, was exactly that she could choose course by course, which to go pass, fail, or which to keep the grade in. It really, part of that, the decision not to do it that way comes in large part from the colleges, where they essentially shared with our counselors on many, many individual calls all over the country that they're okay. If it's pass fail, that's fine. If it's graded, that's okay. They understand the situation that kids are in. But they had essentially said it wouldn't look great to have some pass fail and some grades on the same transcript. So they were suggesting that it would be one or the other. I know that also came from the teachers a bit, where the idea was that if you can engage and do this work and get the grade to do that, and if something got in the way, if something happened in the family, other things, then that credit with distinction or no credit options available, but not to have that sort of course by course option and selection. There are some caveats to it. So if students are in the ECE or any of the early college experience type courses, Project Lead the Way, ECE courses, we've got some with Naugatuck Valley, some of the others, not Naugatuck, Norwalk Community College. If you're in those courses for college credit, those have to be graded. So we're allowing students to do that and then go pass fail on the remaining classes, or again, credit, no credit, if that fits it. But it really was feedback from the colleges, feedback from our teachers. Felt pretty strongly that it should be one or the other, given the purpose of it, around that if there's something going on that's making it difficult to access for you, no matter what that is.
Right. Okay. Thanks. And then just so I totally understand about the GPA thing. So having a junior, of course. So if they choose to get graded, if I understand correctly, the second semester grades will factor into their GPA as they normally would. If they choose to go credit, no credit, the third quarter grades do not get factored into the GPA. It just is only the first semester. Is that right?
That's correct, right? It's
For
just as
this
if
year.
you were to go
So if
for this,
you're going credit, no credit for the.
Yes,
Okay. No, that's right.
that's exactly
Okay,
right.
so
Yep,
it's only your
because,
first,
and
if you
that's
choose credit, no credit, it will only be,
right, as if you had chosen credit, no
no,
credit,
that's fine. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure.
traditionally, right? So, because we do have that option generally for
Right.
kids, if hardship or other reasons. So, we're using that same policy
Mhm.
and saying that what will be on the transcript is the semester grade, not the marking period grade. And the semester grade would be credit, credit with distinction, and no credit for those for this semester, second semester of this year. Yeah,
Okay, all right, thank you.
sure.
It might be
Sure.
helpful to, could you just clarify the goal of the masks? I think just given the news this morning and some questions that we heard on the 4 o'clock call this afternoon, it might be helpful just to provide a little
Absolutely,
information
I'd
on
love to.
the plan for the mask distribution.
Sure. So about a week and a half ago or so, and we talked about it, I think, in our last meeting, we went and we ordered a mask for every student and for our teachers. Part of the reason for that is thank you, right? Part of it is we always like to show New Canaan pride, and they're red, and there's a black NC in the corner. But most importantly, we're getting them so that our students and teachers can start wearing them immediately and stay healthy today. We know that wearing masks will help to keep students and all of us healthier. We're being asked now by the governor's office to, anytime you leave your home, to wear a mask, whether or not you can social distance. Initially, it was wear it if you can't stay without 6 feet or further away. Now they're saying if you leave the home, you should wear it. We want to encourage our students to follow that guideline because of the feedback and science that says if they wear them, they're less likely to contract the disease. We want to keep our students healthy. We don't know if students are going to have to wear masks in the fall. We do know that the masks that we're purchasing are significantly less expensive than you would pay if you went and bought them yourself, because we're buying enough of them. We're buying them in bulk. And we know that they're good quality, where they are washable. They have an insert that can go in there that makes them work very well. It's more than just a piece of cloth over your face. And we hope that our students will wear them and like to wear them because, again, it's a little New Canaan, and they're red with the black lettering. And we just want to do our part to try to help keep everyone safe. I know that the town had a mask distribution a little while ago. Those are the paper masks that really don't last or don't work all that well. These are washable, and students can use them again and again. So we wanted to get them for them to signal the importance of wearing them, not to hold on to them until the fall, but to get them to them right away. So as they come in, we're going to figure out how best to get them in our students' hands as quickly as possible. It may just be a mailing, and we may get them out to our students in the mail. We might have other ways to do it, but I think it's another step we can take to help keep our kids healthy and safe. Does that answer the question, Katrina?
Yeah, no, that was perfect. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, Sherry?
Hi, I did 2 quick things. So one is, 2 quick things. One is, for some reason, we still have some parents who are confused about the start times for the 2021 school year. And so I do think it would be helpful if the board released a statement just reiterating what we've all discussed, that while we understand the concerns around sleep and health issues, that given the budget constraints and also the COVID-19 outbreak, which limits our ability to analyze any potential different routes, that we will not be changing start times for the 2021 school year. I mean, I'm still getting emails about this, and I thought in our discussion we had made that clear, but I do think that we should issue a statement because I think it's been lost on some people. The other comment is just on high school AP exams, and I think this is one of those things that just, with the change to e-learning, everything happens so fast. So typically during APs, the students, when they have the meeting school in person, they have some relief on the AP days. And I know that over the next 2 weeks, there's many AP exams. I happen to have a student who has 5 AP exams. And I'm just wondering if we can build into the e-learning schedule some relief for those students, whether it's an early dismissal or, I don't know, just something. I think we should just think about that, because I know when school meets in person, we do give those half-day reliefs for the AP exams. So
Sure. I'll be glad to run that by the high school administration and have them certainly consider it. The tests are different, of course, the duration is different, all that, but our kids are taking them very seriously, and we want to make sure that we honor their efforts. So yeah, I'll run that by the high school administration. I do also want to share, I know last board meeting, there was a conversation about the senior internship and the experiences and those things for kids. So the high schools had a team working on, while we can't do the internship, some type of senior experience for the kids that they can opt into if they want to. That would start right after Memorial Day for those seniors. And I think they've done a nice job developing some options for kids to consider, at least to give them something a little different, as they go into the last couple of weeks of their school year. It'd be different, of course, if we were there, they'd be going on the internship. So I've always said and believed we shouldn't treat 18, 19-year-old seniors the same way that we treat 14, 15-year-old freshmen. And so the high school is looking to do something a little differently with them, and they've started communicating that today with them. So that was in part, I know, a question or something that came up last board meeting. So I just wanted to give you a quick update on that too. Okay.
All right.
This is virtual wait time.
Yeah. My connection's a little jumpy, so I don't know if I'm behind. Okay, well, unless any other questions or comments? All right, well, we have a meeting on Monday as scheduled. Anything, any other announcements? Anything else?
I think that's enough.
Oh,
Great.
Okay. With that, motion to adjourn. Sherry, second. Penny, all in favor? All right, good night, everyone. Thank you.